episode of After Dinner Chats. This is Series 2, Signal and Sparks. Well, the president was set with Series 1, Ripped Off Less, where we asked 3 questions of a former diner at the next dinner party, or TNDP, because the world needs another bloody abbreviation. The next dinner party started in 2007 in Sydney and continues to this day in, well, wherever I'm working. Indeed, tonight we've got the last next dinner party of 2025. And what a crew in a lovely restaurant in the heart of London. Great. This after dinner chat is with Steve Mader, whom I met on a fabulous pitch team while we both worked in another agency group. It was a great pitch experience. We won, yay! And we've stayed friends ever since. He's now at Criteo and I'm at WPP. And let's see what he has to say. Steve, hello, good to see you.
You as well, my friend.
So now I'm going to kick straight into the extravaganza that is the pod conversation, if I may. To begin with, the signal in the noise. What's been in the press or in the news this week that's been of interest to you? A signal for the future, perhaps?
Well, it's interesting because I can go full kind of contrarian and find something no one would ever think of, or be somewhat cliche and say there's some AI stuff. So what I'm going to do is take a specific element of the AI stuff that's happening. So based on time of recording, the Amazon Unboxed conference happened very recently. And I think what they've kind of showcased is very much the direction that at least I'm seeing kind of retail and retail media in particular move. So if you think about just agentic commerce and all the AI in our fun little retail world, there's all the checkout kind of embedded shopping capabilities that all of the players are coming out with. You've got all kinds of elements of, well, what should the retailers be doing in terms of building MCP connections, allowing brands to build more, say, AI and agent-centric PDPs and copy and narrative in a way that speaks to an agent rather than speaks to an algorithm or a keyword or a search term or something like that. But what Amazon came out with, I think, is the direction, which is going to be, how do I simplify all the different pieces of the puzzle in a way that democratizes access across many large advertising, either agencies or brands. So they've come out with some campaign builders, some full funnel orchestration agents, ability to measure impact in a relatively holistic way from one single agent platform. And it sounds simplistic that they've been connecting the dots, but anyone who's worked with Amazon knows it tends to be lots of incredibly robust platforms. They don't necessarily speak to each other in the way that you would intend it to happen. And this is a really good point on their journey to making it easier to run campaigns, buy media, and ultimately simplify the way that agencies and brands access it in a way that you don't need to have an army of hands-on keyboard folks to be able to access this. And I think this is the direction, the way that Criteo, for example, is starting to build our product roadmap as well, which is how can we simplify the way that agencies and brands and advertisers buy, and how can we democratize more of that across their organization in a way that lets anyone essentially see what's happening. And I think that's a really, really good step on the journey.
Nice. I like how you segue from what's in the news straight into the second part, where I'm going to ask you about connecting the dots of what you're up to right now. I want to take a step back, though. When you're looking at how all the different walled gardens are building their empires within their world, and you've got advertisers who want to be on every platform everywhere, and then they're finding it hard to look at the attribution across the different channels, because as consumers, you will jump from one place to the next. But as in the industry, we're starting to spend money with one platform. Well, we've been spending money with the different platforms and getting stuck within their walled gardens, and those walls are difficult to break across. What made you pick Amazon over the others? Do you think they're more interesting within your space from a commerce perspective, or are you talking about them, you think, just generally from a data perspective?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why. So one is because your questions in the brief was specifically around the most recent signal, James. So that's why I focused on that, because it was relatively top of mind recent. But in general, like it's not that Amazon is building the future that is going to be different from the way that other large retailers are building, right? Walmart's doing a fantastic job. Tesco and Nectar, look more closer to home, are doing a very good job. And Criteo, of course, is on our journey of helping to enable all of our partners on their journey as well. What I do think is that for the specific kind of, whether it's e-commerce or retail media kind of hockey stick growth that we're all seeing in many different markets, Amazon tends to be the one that can be the catalyst for change across many of our largest agency partners and the advertising partners, whether it's the way that they do supply chain and how we've had to flex their supply chain to be more Amazon inclusive, to be profitable in that way, or whether it's just the huge amount of money that everybody saw flowing through retail media networks when Amazon came out with their a bit more transparency when they broke out specific media attribution a couple of years ago. They tend to be the one that is large enough to drive change top down within many of the largest general merchandise and CPG companies. So that's why I gravitated to them in that response. But it is really critical, because if you don't get that largest player right, it tends to cascade into the rest. When you think about cost to serve, you think about supply chain, you think about the way that business intelligence platforms are connecting dots internally. If you build for the largest strategic customers, and of course Amazon's going to be one of them for many Western-centric brands, you have to kind of see where that's moving to be able to capitalize on it yourself or to actually move in front of it.
Fair. Thank you. Now I'm going to go back to the next part as you started talking about Criteo. Love to hear how you're connecting the dots and what your process is and what are you doing today, you personally, Steve Mader, but also within the bigger picture of Criteo itself as the big beast that it is.
Sure. Let me give you a little bit of background for the dear listeners who may not know kind of the journey. Obviously, James, we've known each other for a while, so you kind of know the point of view. But I spent most of my career at that intersection of where's the future of retail moving and how are large brands having to rewire themselves to capitalize on that. That could be org design, that could be the way that they approach digital shelf, or that could be the way that they have to integrate retail media into the way that the media planning overall operates so that it scales. So we think about what Criteo has brought me in to do, most recently coming from a large holdco agency where I ran a large chunk of the commerce capabilities for that agency. It's looking at everything from the demand side of how retail media is operating. So that's what are agencies trying to do? What is the agency's value proposition out to their clients? And for a brand, direct via Criteo account teams or in partnership with an agency, it's what are they trying to accomplish in terms of how are they investing money into the retail media networks that drive the most amount of outcome, whether that's a awareness outcome or a commercial outcome. How do they spend the money wisely? How do they build better digital shelf presence? What's the right assortment? All the normal things that an e-commerce operation works or looks at. Part of me coming in is to help orchestrate all of the insights and data assets and capabilities that Criteo has to better serve our demand side partners, whether it's agencies or brands. So that's the remit. So I'm looking at everything from are we integrated into all of the holdco media planning suites, whether that's yourself with a WPP hat on, our old world at Omnicom, for example. It's ensuring that if a strategist or a planner is keen to drive investment and reach through a Criteo-enabled retailer, that we help reduce the friction, allow them to do that. And same thing with brands. It's to ensure that we're working with everyone from hands-on keyboard retail media managers all the way up to CMOs to ensure that if they're looking at spending money and driving investment through our network, that they have the tools, capabilities, and understanding to do that at scale, and to justify that the investment pays back in a way that makes most amount of sense to whatever campaign objective they're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so you just basically described the massive job of trying to make sure that everybody is using Criteo to the best of Criteo's advantage, or is it to the advantage of the advertiser? What's the one thing that you guys have got that you can't get elsewhere?
Something that I've realized coming in, because I've been a Criteo client for years, going on 10 years now, back when it was the component parts of some of the retail media businesses that Criteo has acquired along the way. And coming in, there's a couple of things that I have realized, because I'm only 6-ish months in, so I'm still onboarding, James. There's a couple of key things. One is we've got like 230 retailers in the network, right? And that has a huge amount of scale when you start looking at search trends or on-site organic ranking trends or paid media trends across all of these different retailers. When you start looking at it in aggregate, it starts to paint a really interesting picture around where the demand is moving to, and what types of assortment are driving the right type of profitable volume for retailers and the suppliers. So that's one, is that we're sitting on a lot more data than I think many advertisers realize. And then second is from the performance media side of things, which I personally do not have a lot of visibility of before coming into Criteo, is that there's so much data that we are sitting on that is completely under-leveraged by our advertising partners around who's shopping where. If something has an abandoned basket on one D2C site, we may be able to look at, well, they're actually converting over here. So being able to paint a picture of shopper behavior and consumer behavior in a way that allows them to build custom audiences to potentially drive win-back campaigns is also something that has massive potential. So we're sitting on two very distinct data sets that combined, I think, is fairly unique in the industry.
High five round. Tell me, what are the 5 things I'm going to ask you? I'm going to start off with your hero. Who is your hero?
Yeah, this is a tough one, James, because I can't narrow it down to one. I'm going through the cliche. I'm going to be like my kids and my wife, and very important. But I'm going to go with a more kind of fun one. And my very first job at a university was at a company called Kantar. It's a very large market research company. So I'm not going to choose one person, because then their ego will get too large to fit into a room. But I'm going to go with the original kind of leadership team of that Kantar business unit that I joined, because it was such a formative component of the way that I think about retail, that I still, even now, almost 20 years later, go back to it and say, like, okay, well, what are those 4-box models that everything can be distilled into? Or what is the word that we can make up that helps describe the environment that we're operating in? And being able to have those people kind of shepherd the way that myself and then the teams that I build, decades later, around how it's not just around e-commerce growth, but it's the impact that e-commerce has on the rest of the business, and how supply chain has to change, and demand planning and creative process, everything is incredibly important to me. And then I'm going to say all of the 4 or 5 of them in that world.
Was that in Canada?
No, that was in Boston.
In Boston, okay.
Yeah.
And that would have been Glendinning team, would it? Is that the Glendinning?
Glendinning would have been a component of that original kind of Kantar organization, but not specifically the Glendinning team. They came later.
Okay. What's your best decision to date?
Moving to London.
Okay.
I know, it's easy. It's my wife and I decided after Boston to move to London. Neither of us had ever been here before. So we're like, screw it, let's just go. And we thought we'd be here for 4 or 5 years, and it's now significantly longer than that. So we've got 2 children who were born here who have very British passports. They sound like cartoon characters to me because they can switch between a very London accent and a Canadian accent, depending on who they're speaking to and which grandparent they're speaking to. But it is by far our best decision because it is an incredible city, meeting everybody. It's where you and I met, for example, and it is a place where you can do anything that you want at any moment in time. So it's my favorite city.
I'm delighted to hear that. So what's your worst decision?
Worst decision. This is a tough one because I made a lot, James. Some really bad decisions. As long as you learn, it's fine. And other things that you could put up on a poster behind me. I would say very early on in my career, you know, the kind of the not just ad tech, but just technology sayings of like, let's move fast and break things, and how that drives innovation. Yeah, that works when the entire culture of a business is around that type of mentality. But if you're the only person and no one else in the organization thinks like that, all you are is just an ass. So I thankfully learned that very early on in my career of moving fast and breaking things doesn't really work when you're breaking everybody else's stuff. So it's something which I always go back to, which is realizing how you can build things at scale in the environment that you're operating within and the culture of the company, because it often is very easy to go quickly if you're doing it by yourself, but you don't make as large of an impact and scale that you think you do unless you bring everybody else on the journey along with you.
Awesome. What's your funniest moment?
Funniest? Every day, James. It's more fun when you're having a little bit of joy. I would say it's a bit of story time. Sorry. So my wife and I are Canadian. If you can't tell by my very Canadian accent, despite living here for so many years. And the funniest moment is kind of looking back, and you've met my wife once, but in passing. But she's like chief customer officer at the companies that she operates within. She's in software and SaaS, and she's the type of person where if you throw her at a conference room or like a networking meeting, she will come out an hour later knowing everyone's dog's names and children's birthdays and stuff like that, right? So that's what she's really good at. So when we first moved here, it was the Olympics, right? So very joyous time in London. And we, as everybody does when they move to a new city, they join, the subreddit for that city, or they join a bunch of meetups and then determine, well, everyone here is going to be a nerd because you kind of went to a meetup. So you try to find your specific type of nerd that you are okay and comfortable with. So we were doing a Canadian meetup during the Olympics to go do some finals watch party. We went to the Maple Leaf pub, which is in Covent Garden, which you would assume the Maple Leaf pub is an amazing Canadian bar. It's a catastrophically terrible Canadian bar, James. Don't associate Canada with that bar, despite the amount of Maple Leaf flags all over the walls. Terrible beer selection. Sorry. So anyway, we were in there years and years and years ago, and in walks a massive camera crew and a guy called Peter Mansbridge, who it is difficult to compare. See, the most equivalent is going to be someone like, Walter Cronkite in the US, or I'm going to fail horribly at being British because it wasn't on the Life in the UK test to draw the parallels here. But it's someone who's on the nightly news every day at 5:30 p.m. for 30 years type of thing. So in he walks to do his foreign correspondent thing, all about the Olympics. And he starts going on interviewing all the people. And he gets to my wife, and she is completely starstruck, awestruck, and mutes, physically cannot say anything. This is someone who can talk about anything. So she's there with a microphone in her face, live, back to Canada, completely mute. And within about 30 seconds, I'm getting texts from like the grandparents saying, why is Jen on the news not being able to say anything? It is just the most hilarious thing because Peter's manager just still circling around. So we show the text and she tries to have another conversation, can't do it. It's just, it is a very funny in the moment thing. Where
so someone who can talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime, can't when there's a TV camera in her face. That's how very annoying, but how wonderful to.
But it's a long time ago, so it's again learn from mistakes and improve over time, James. It is very, very funny looking back to it because you can YouTube it, and I'm not going to tell you how to do that. It's out there on the blogosphere's subway.
You just play that back to every now and then, just when opportune moments. You're a bright spark. I'm going to ask you to recommend somebody to come on this podcast. Now, to come on the podcast, you should have been at a dinner beforehand to the after dinner chats. So who would you recommend?
It's a good question because I don't entirely know who's been to all of your dinner parties, but I do know that there's someone and he's going to be like, what did you do? So there's a guy called Patrick Ryan who I met, both of us probably met, as he was the PhD, essentially global head of business development. So when I first joined the agency, I thought business development was very much going to be something to the extent of, get some leads out there, get some marketing automation to help drive everything down to, a business development sales team. But no, it's very much around like, no, we've got like 5 inbound RFPs that we know are going to happen every single year. And then we spend 6 months to orchestrate the best of the agency to help capture what the opportunity is. And he has a very unique storytelling ability that I will always remember. So would highly recommend bringing him on.
Indeed. Patrick, at the beginning of this year, did come out for dinner, and he's a great storyteller. I'm delighted that he set up his own business. And it was him who introduced you and me, actually, because it was on a specific pitch that we met in that pitch room with Patrick. So I'm delighted. It's a great recommendation, and I'll be pinging him shortly. Steve, thanks so much for catching up with me today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. We'll do it again soon.
In the twilight, we gather around the table, stories to share, ideas unstable with signals bright. Through data we roam, creating sparks.